I'm going to read two works. The first work is a short poem and a light poem that's dedicated to Bridget Saunders, who's here and who is a visitor and is staying with us, with Aggie and myself, at our place. She's from New Zealand, and this is a little poem I wrote for her. And it has a pun in it on Berlusconi, you know, the fascist leader of Italy. It's a pun on his name because she sent me from New Zealand what turned out to be the cover, a terrific cover of a book that I translated by a young Italian poet named Andrea Garbin. That, you can get the book in City Lights, but anyway, I'll read this little poem and then I want to read an arcane. This is called Maid Amana. I'm so fucking happy to be here. I'm so fucking happy you're here. Things are curiouser, more pristine. I even started rereading my old copy of Justine. Let's be each other's fidget, and maybe a kiss too, dear Bridget. I promise no matter how many burlesque colognes try to come between, you'll always be the scullery maid of honor in the Union Street house of King Joke and Huggy, the Swedish queen. Now, I was going to read the poem to conclude this evening that was in the Africa Arcane, that's in the Our that Sarah graciously published. But Steve's beautiful poem about the pilot also covers a lot that's in the Africa Arcane. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to read, and I ask Steve's indulgence because he's the only one here who heard me read it last week at the Labor Fest. And I want to read a poem that I said took all my life. It's the poem that means perhaps in a way more to me, you'll understand it, than any poem. It's like I wanted to write this poem all my life, and I finally did. You'll understand when I read this. It's called The Soviet Cenotaph Arcane. Arcane, for those who don't know, is the name of my longer poems. The Soviet Cenotaph Arcane. 1. When my eyes fell upon their tears, they couldn't keep from remembering, and I stammer at the memory of my own beholding it, what I'd never known about, never saw a mention of, not one in my 34 years in the communist movement. No article I'd ever read referenced it, neither in Russian nor in German, and not in American. What I'd seen on May 8th, Liberation Day, in that shrine 10 hectares long, created collectively by sculptor Yevgeny Vuchetich, architect Yakov Velopolsky, artist Alexander Gorpenko, and engineer Sara Valerius, was my whole life, from before I even was born. And then, having been born in 1933, to destroy the bestial force born that same year, a power which mocked, derogated, maliciously dismissed, trashed, imprisoned, tortured, and killed not simply me when a child or adolescent, but even now and into the future. I was and I am. And this isn't some esoteric arcane, though the memorial cenotaph with its drop mouth, sheer size, and perfect symmetry intrinsic to its form is a schrei of silence, a mysterium. 2. Past time one wants to redeem is the future one is present for. A photo can't capture it. Absolutely cannot. Nor can photos of the statue of Motherland grieving for her dead sons near the entrance, or photos of any of the sarcophagi reveal the feeling of the park. You may Google them, computer images, even videos will appear, but they'll mean very little. You must go there. I'm not pitching a tour. You must go there to feel and understand what your life's about, what's happened to it, and all you loved since Yevgeny Vuchetich completed the towering statue of the soldier who saved a tiny 3-year-old German girl from death in the battle, and today carries her at his shoulder high over the stairway and grove of honor below. You must go there with me now. We're going to see a hymn, a socialist realist hymn, perhaps the most extraordinary work of sculpture fused with a serenity of stillness, creating an apotheosis of modern classicism. 3, you'll become originary in this solemn ground. Time will stop for you. Ur will doff its cap, and with a good and gentle smile will become Ur in you, as it's made me become so ontologically intense as after the death of a friend, when life insists, as if he was still talking to you, on continuing. But after this, which is, after all, after that which, immeasurable, is still resonating so differently. And I write here and now, Kentaur, in the Cyrillic letters I'll forever love. The first word I wrote in Russian one night in 1976 in Specs Bar in North Beach, San Francisco, California, the United States, the world, finished my first poem in that language, and for the next 11 years wrote a poem in Russian between 2 written in American virtually every single day, I'm pleased to say, and to the why, because the weight of death is heavy. The Soviet Union had become champions of sacrifice and defense of the revolution its 16 republics had sustained, because a pack of bigot political whores, year after year, decade upon decade, had poisoned the minds of my own countrymen with filthy hatred against Russian people and even against the Soviet government that had been born to lead an international charge. From the very start, its revolution had been mocked, denied, maliciously dismissed, invaded, comrades jailed, tortured, killed. So yes, Kentaur, for I love a centaur image of half man, half horse, and would lay there in my unconsciousness as a boy, mythologizing it in mind. And maybe when I wrote that first poem in Russian, I was thinking not only of Kent State, but Kent McCarthy, barman in Specs, who's long since died of a rotten hotshot overdose he accepted one sleazy early morning. So yes, fuck you, capitalist US, for him. But not only for it, for the millions upon millions of dead, near dead, or anonymously dying souls in its den of drugs run by pukes of runaway rotting greeds, Wall Street mafia crapshooters, markets with golden oil pissing out of corporate penises, jammed into global buttmobiles, and for East Berlin and peace rallies after 1945, for Joliet Curie, whose sister was blessed with a radiant soul for a brother, for Paul Robeson, noblest American artist of the past 2 generations, for Terry Winter, my adolescent love, who opened my eyes to the whole dream for the first time, for Pablo Neruda, poet who's remained with us all, for the Associated Press teletypist in the execution room, weeping out each letter, taking a lifetime, no, 2, as life was being taken out of the Rosenbergs, the copyboy tissues with the story on them that I had to spike on the editor's desks around that vast office arrived wet with tears, for René Depestre, all of 19, with no alas to his name then, who was a Haitian comet, for Steve Nelson and the Daily Worker and the Jefferson School, for I.F. Stone, for Jennings Perry, Google him, he's here too, for the many Nedix workers and those in the automat, and those in unions kicked in the teeth by a fascist Taft-Hartley law, for masterful comrades like Nelson Peary and Fran Fury, bus driver Bobby Jordan, who in truth's time never swerved, for Charlie and Miles bopping on 52nd Street, for everything making me curious and opening wide, for the women in the sweatshops on 149th Street in the Bronx before there was sex, or just as girls were beginning to be of Freud and shrinks got under the masses' skin, for the Communist Labor Party and Sue Ying and Willie Baptist in the Tom Mooney bookstore on Valencia Street, where I first asked for the poems of the man known as the devil, the monster, the serial killer, the destroyer of communism, the worse than Hitler twice over, and whose words on each of the 16 sarcophagi in this Soviet cenotaph, written in stone between 1947 and 49, text you can't find on any Google file, words and ideas uncensored only by going to the cenotaph itself, are the reason the event of the park, known as Ehrenmal Treptow, has been removed from your humanity and overlooked as if it were nothing more than propaganda etched in stone for the curious. 4. Through the arched entrance on Pushkin Alley, after a distant statue in springtime, in snow, in lightning, rain, or sunshine, of motherland, seated, raised up on 2 granite plinths, her head lowered in grief, her left arm ending in a clench of her cloak over her heart, that's also her courage and resolve. Along an avenue of birch trees, then, you come to a wide portal of 2 huge red granite pylons in the form of Soviet flags, and beneath each, a young and an old soldier, both kneeling, helmets in hands, heads lowered, as solemn guardians of the way to the grove of honor some steps below. Under its grass, the 4,800 Red Army men and women are buried. To the left, a series of 8 white marble sarcophagi, each separated by about 100 feet, showing aerial attacks on Soviet villages by Hitlerian villains who wanted to enslave or eliminate peoples of the Ukraine, Belarus, Baltics, Crimea, and the Caucasus, showing also seeds of partisan resistance, the contribution of workers to the Red Army, the unity of army, the people, and the party, rifles raised to the distance under an image of Lenin, extolling defenders of besieged Russian cities, and then the Battle of Berlin, and the courage, sacrifice, and sorrow of the Red Army, the act of liberation contrasting the Soviet ideology of harmony among peoples to the Hitler fascist ideology of bestial nationalism and race hatred. And the final sarcophagus evokes a funeral ceremony for a fallen soldier who fought for the liberty and independence of the USSR, victory and heroic death, with text written into the stone on the spine of each bas-relief in Cyrillic by J. Stalin, which texts are translated into German and appear on 8 marble replicas on the right side of the grove, the total of 16 representing all the republics that comprise the Soviet Union. In the center of the 2 series of sarcophagi, up the steps of the Kurgan, an ancient Russian burial mound, under which 200 more Soviet soldiers lie buried, where you can look through a window filled with flowers on this day of liberation and see the 16 Union Republics delegates in a semicircle in the many-colored mosaic mausoleum, all eyes upon a radiant blue ledger in which is written the names of all the soldiers buried in the groves and under the Kurgan Hill. And from the roof of that mausoleum, which is a huge pedestal, the giant figure, nearly 35 feet high, of Nikolai Ivanovich Maslov, holding the German girl on his arm, his sword lowered, his foot stepping on a broken swastika. 5. Slava, 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 Keroyam, Slava, 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 Keroyam. I declaim it as I've sung it for a generation, the triumphal requiem of Robert Roszczynski, a summit of song on the Orphic mountain of the truth of life that Rilke understood as Gesang is Dasein, song is existence. And because when I ask myself, and am asked by myself, what's the most significant historical event in the life of the 20th century to now, the event which all subsequent events, wars, murders, suicides, natural disasters resonate with, from the mountain's height of song, the park of the Soviet cenotaph below, its shape, a long coffin where the body of your life is lying in a state of soul, enclosed by trees with leaves of grass all around. The second generation since the end of the war, 66 years ago, lifts its voice and sings in reply, Slava, 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 Heroya.